What's doing, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. If you've never been here before, please check out over 400 videos that I have. You could go on a binge and check them all out. I suggest that you do so. I think you'll enjoy it. Everybody else, welcome back. I served 17 years in the New York State prison system. I was sentenced to 12 and a half to 25 years. Before I was sentenced to 12 and a half to 25 years, I was unfortunately charged with murder in the second degree when I was 24 years old. Why that happened, what led me to take someone's life, is a different story that I have discussed, but not something I'm talking about today. But it is necessary to bring up so you can comprehend the story that I'm about to tell. I was charged with murder in the second degree, and I sat on Rikers Island for 3 years. Um, During those 3 years, the judge would tell me if I pled guilty, he would give me a sentence of 20 years to life. If I went to trial and I lost, I would end up with 25 years to life. So it wasn't the greatest offer. He was asking me to plead guilty to a sentence of 20 to life. And I was very worried about that sentence because in New York State, the word life means life. In other words, if I accepted the sentence of 20 to life, I would have to do 20 years, and the state of New York can hold me for the rest of my life if they wanted to. So I did not want a sentence with the word life on it. I saw too many guys getting sentenced to life. I did not want to die in the New York State prison system. Of course, many will say, well, then don't commit a crime. I agree with that. But that's not the point of this story either. I did commit the crime. What led me up to that is another story in itself. But let me back up a little bit and explain how I got out of receiving a life sentence. For those of you that have never tuned into the channel before, I come from a small town. My father was a police lieutenant in that small town. My grandfather was the police commissioner of that small town. And my grandmother was involved in the police department and later became involved in politics. So I had a very powerful family inside of this town. And I myself became nothing but trouble. I was a very good kid with a good heart. I loved people, was a natural caregiver, went out of my way to help others. We're not telling my life story right now, but what had happened was my father left when I was 4 years old. I know that's not a reason to go off the rails, but I was one of those kids that really needed the discipline of a father figure in my life. When he left, I felt completely abandoned and I rebelled in the incorrect way. I had a mother who had a lot of issues herself. Then, at the age of 9 and 10 years old, I started to get sexually abused. This caused a lot of subconscious necessities inside of me, like the necessity to prove to the world I was a man, the necessity to prove to myself I was a man. And I became really confused and lost as a child. And what I did was turn to drugs, and the drugs numbed the pain and the embarrassment of what happened to me. The drugs helped me fit in with the older kids in the community who I thought were real men. So there were a lot of reasons why I went in the wrong direction. But before you knew it, I was completely out of control. By the time I was 15, I had been arrested several times already. I was breaking into businesses, I was robbing things, I was doing drugs at the age of 13 and 14 years old. I was getting put in detention centers. And every time I would get in front of a judge, the judge really didn't want to penalize me too much because of how powerful my family was in the community. And so they would give me a break. After break, I would steal a car as a 14-year-old. The judge would say 10 days in the children's shelter. Then I shot someone in the face with a pellet gun. 20 days in the children's shelter. Then I stole a racing boat and went out into the ocean. Finally, the judge put me away and he sent me to a juvenile detention center for 18 months. And when I would come home at the age of 16, I would become worse. I would start committing more crimes, and I was very assaultive. I was getting in a lot of fights. At 16 years old, I was a tough kid, and I would start sneaking into the bars at a young age, just looking for a fight. And sometimes I would end up catching a beating. And I loved it. That was my way to prove to the world I was a man. And I would get arrested for assaulting a police officer, 16, 17 years old. I'd stand in front of the judge, and it was the judge that I would eat dinner inside of his house several times before I stood in front of him because he was my grandfather's friend. And so the judge didn't want to put me away. He didn't want to send me to jail. This was my grandfather's friend. I was eating dinner inside of his home. My father was a lieutenant in the community. And so the judge would say 30 days in a hospital, 60 days in a hospital. Then I would get arrested again for assaulting a police officer with a weapon. And he would say 30 days in a psychiatric rehab, 90 days in a rehab. Then I got arrested again, a different time, for throwing a police officer down a flight of steps. Anyone else would have gotten 5 to 15 years in prison. I received 9 months in a psychiatric rehab. So the judges, in essence, were enabling me, right? They saw it as helping me out. They saw it as doing a favor for a family friend. I saw it as a way for me to continue this destructive and negative behavior. And because they continued to let me go, because they continued to give me a break, this only threw fuel on the fire for me to continue to get in trouble. And I would go on to be arrested between 9 and 11 times, mostly for assault. 3 assaults on police officers, a couple of road rage incidents. The point I'm making is that by the judges doing this, they gave me a history on paper. If you looked at me on paper, it looked like I had severe psychiatric problems. I definitely did have problems in my life. I definitely did have issues in my life. I was out of control. I was addicted to drugs. But on paper, it looked like I had more problems, probably, than I actually did. These hospitals were diagnosing me with bipolar disorder, manic depression, personality disorder. I mean, all time. They were medicating me with lithium and Prozac and Cylert and Ritalin and experimenting with all these drugs. When the truth was that I was just a kid who was lost. I was a kid who had no father. I was a kid who had nobody to kick me in my ass when I needed it. And I had a system and a circle that was enabling me to continue this behavior. And as a kid, what was better than that? To me, to just continuously be let go. I mean, so that is part of the story. That's just a brief part of the story of what happened, and I would eventually, sadly, take someone's life. Um, I'm not going to get into that whole situation right now because this is about when the judge offered me 20 years to life for the charge of murder if I pled guilty. Um, and I didn't want to take it. I was scared to death to take it. I felt that I would die in the prison system if I took it. So I was standing in front of the judge, handcuffed, the courtroom packed, my mother in the courtroom, and the judge said, I'm going to offer you 20 years to life again. Would you like to accept the offer? And in between my fingers, I had a little piece of glass, a sliver of glass with a really sharp point that I snuck into the courthouse in my sleeve. I opened up the sleeve and put the glass in there. And when he offered me the 20 to life, I took the piece of glass, stuck it inside of my face, and ripped my face open in front of the judge. I would get rushed to the emergency room. They would give me about 30 stitches in my face. And then they would order me to a psychiatric hospital to be evaluated to see if I was fit to stand in the courtroom. And I would go to Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital, Kings County Psychiatric Hospital. Mid-Hudson Psychiatric Hospital, Kirby Psychiatric Hospital. And they would do all these evaluations on me. And I would behave in a certain way inside of the psychiatric hospitals to make them think I was completely unstable. I have many insane, intense stories of what took place inside of these mental institutions. And eventually, they would say that they stabilized me through medication and therapy, and they put me back in front of the judge. And when I get back in front of the judge, he said, the offer's still 20 to life. And I ripped my face open again. And so I have 2 scars on the side of my face. And I'd go back to the hospital for another year for evaluations. And they would dope me up and drug me up and throw me in padded rooms and medicate me. And I was with New York's criminally insane. And then I went in front of the judge again. And he scolded me. And he said, I don't like any tricks inside of my courtroom. He said, you are either going to go to trial or you're going to accept this 20 years to life. He goes, today. And I snuck another piece of glass in the courtroom. And this time I ripped my throat open. Yeah. I took the piece of glass and ripped my throat open right in front of the judge. Everybody says when I tell this story, and I'm just giving you the quick story, the quick go through, everyone says, Fish, man, that's crazy. Fish, you are crazy. Must be something wrong with you. What was wrong with me is I was fighting for my life. I knew that if I took 20 years to life, I was going to die in the New York State prison system. I believed that. I honestly believed it. And I was doing anything that I can do to avoid that from happening. After I cut my throat and I went to Mid-Hudson, they took me from Rikers Island. They sent me to Mid-Hudson for another 1-year evaluation. And the doctors put the reports in front of the judge. And when I came back in front of the judge said, I am willing to take the charge of murder and reduce it to the charge of manslaughter in the first degree. And if you plead guilty to the charge of manslaughter in the first degree, he says, I will offer you a sentence of 12 and a half to 25 years. I said, I'll take it. Today, I'll take it. And I spoke to my lawyer, and he said, if you want to take it today, you can take it by the end of the day. We'll put you back in the bullpen. You can wait there all day. They'll draw up the paperwork. I'll bring you back in front of the judge. You can officially accept the 12 and a half to 25 years. I says, I'll accept that. I'll take that. Because it was the first time in over 3 years of sitting on Rikers Island and inside of the mental institutions that I heard or received an offer without the word life on the back. I knew they were going to keep me every single day they could of this 12 and a half to 25 year sentence. But it was better than life. And I accepted it. And I would eventually, from that point on, go back to Rikers Island for a few months and then be shipped up to the prison system to serve 12 and a half to 25 years. That pain that I went through, the intensity that I went through, how scared I was to do all that, the fear that I was going to die in the prison system. Some will say, well, you took someone's life. Maybe you deserve to die in the prison system. I didn't intend to take someone's life. It wasn't intentional. I didn't wake up that morning with the intention of taking someone's life. It wasn't something I wanted to happen. I was responsible for it. But it wasn't something I wanted to happen. And the circumstances of every case are different. I didn't go with a gun and run into a store to do a robbery and intentionally kill someone and steal the money. It wasn't something like that. It was an altercation when I was 24 years old between myself and another 24-year-old man who actually stabbed me first, twice, before I took out my own knife and ended up taking his life. Many of you say that was self-defense, but you don't know the circumstances of the case. You don't know what happened, why it happened, how it happened. That's another story. but I didn't intend for it to happen. And because it wasn't an intentional murder, I don't feel I should have died in the prison system for it. Not just because it's me, but if I looked at my case and say it was someone else, I would say that person didn't deserve to die in the prison system. It was a rough road. And if anyone thinks that it can't happen to them, you're out of your mind. As I said, I'm the son of a police officer. I'm the son of a lieutenant. I'm the grandson of a police commissioner. If it could happen to me, it could easily happen to you. And you would be in a different situation than me. I had that history to help me. I had that history that the judge looked at, and he saw all those stays in mental institutions. He saw all those visits and stays and placements in psychiatric rehabs. And he took that into consideration. And then he saw me cutting my face open and cutting my throat open. And I had to take drastic measures not to get life in prison. And I took the 12 and a half to 25 and I went upstate. So that is how I received 12 and a half to 25 years when the New York prison system really wanted to give me life. That's just a brief part of the story. I'll talk to you guys later. Be well.